some people aren't. We've been discussing Ukraine. Who's he in bed with, or who isn't he in bed with? Maybe the same thing when it comes to Epstein. I don't know. Forget all of that. This is the president of the United States that wants to wipe out history. Isn't this what the Chinese did with their Cultural Revolution? Thank you very much, Les, and we'll now go to Aaron.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, and I would just note, I mean, there were past presidents that did a lot more than have straight racist thoughts, and there was all kinds of racist actions. I think it's important to remember that in this context, in part because some of what Trump is doing is not out of step with past presidencies. But there are other things, like what he's doing with the Smithsonian, which clearly is different, certainly in magnitude, if not in kind. And I think it's like past time for people to stop following the bouncing ball as if we should take everything that he's saying at face value. And you know, he's the president. We should listen to him. You know, clearly he's there's a rationale here, and it's the rationale that he's offering us. In the first Trump term, and until very, very recently, the big argument about whether or not Donald Trump actually fit the definition of a fascist came down to cultural production and impression of history. This was the thing that sort of made him somewhat different. That it wasn't just sort of a strand of right-wing authoritarian neoliberalism that was not really that different than, like take your pick, like Nixon or Reagan, were people who I would describe as being right-wing authoritarian in ways that fit into the mainstream of American society, right? Law and order, that kind of thing. This is where he has jumped so far beyond the line that even the people who aren't inclined to have conversations about whether or not this is fascism or not really should engage. Or even if you're not going to have the kind of intellectual academic discussion of whether or not this fits the definition, just react accordingly. Just know that this is what it looks like. This is, when people say, if not for those people, we would restore our former glory, that has a long history that we can, even if they try to destroy the museums, that we can reflect on and understand how that's utilized and how that kind of right-wing authoritarian power is wielded against particularly the marginalized who are most easily scapegoated, whose power is most easily taken away. And to also understand that if you're lucky enough to be, frankly, like I am in many ways, just far enough outside of those marginalized categories, but not that far, that they come for you. Right? Like that's how this works. There's all kinds of institutions in the U.S. that are doing their best to, we can acquiesce just a little. Like we can be a little complicit, and then the bad fascist man will pass us over, and it will all be okay. If we just give a few hundreds of millions of dollars to Donald Trump, they won't come after my university anymore. And that way we get to preserve the institution and not have to fight too hard, not have him come too hard after us. If we disagree that we'll do whatever he says with our law firm, then we'll be able to continue practicing law. Or, if our museums are just sanitized out a little bit, I mean, a little bit of fascist is not that big of a deal, right? It's ridiculous. Any of us, and I am someone who has studied much authoritarianism around the world, whether that's the fascist strand or the communist strand or some other kind of totalitarian brand of politics, this always ends up in the same place. And it doesn't stop until there's something that stops it. And this pretending that this feels kind of bad, sort of, kind of, but I'm going to basically go, about my day. It always gets harder to resist. Every single time. Every single scenario that you see around the world. This is not a self-correcting problem. It's not a thing where if we just wait them out, maybe the taco bowl will get them. Like the people who are behind this, the people who are not just complicit, but the architects of it, the Stephen Millers of the world, the Steve Bannons of the world, these people are going to outlive Trump. And their brand of politics is going to outlive Trump. And the only way to beat this kind of fascist takeover is to meet it head on. And when he comes from the museums, there should be people out there defending the museums. And same thing for any other institution or group of people who are under attack. Because otherwise, terrible, terrible things not only will happen, will continue to happen, which is what we've been seeing over and over again. So I really hope that well-meaning people who want something better than what he's offering wake up and recognize what this looks like. And then if you were to pick a leader, you would describe this as being Duterte-esque, or, a la Mussolini, or, take your pick. There's different elements that meet different standards, right? The good news is that he's not actively engaged in, mass murder, or, there isn't a mass sending of people to Gulag, so, he's building up towards it. But this slippery slope that we're on, you have to push back, or we know where this ends up. And I'm getting very, very fed up with the Pollyannas and the people who want to maintain some kind of mainstream centrist, it's all going to be okay, this is in the natural range, swinging pendulum kind of politics. And for people to understand that this is of a different kind, and it's not a kind that we have in this country in living memory, and that we need to look further afield to understand what's happening. Thanks.
I think those are very wise words, and I think my takeaway from what you said is this is not politics as usual. This is not Democrat versus Republican, liberals versus conservatives. And sometimes we are so engrossed in our habitual approach to what's going on that we fail to recognize this. Thank you. Scott?
Can you come back to me?
Absolutely. Double.
Yeah, you have to come back to me too. Sorry, can't talk right now.
No worries, Hurricane.
Hello, hi. So when I think about Trump's announcement about removing the slavery references from the Smithsonian references, I can't help but conclude that it is one of the administration's latest examples of anti-black authoritarianism. It's not just authoritarian, it is anti-black and authoritarian, because the institution of slavery in this country affected one group, black people. And the move to remove slavery references is read together with the attack, the administration's attack against DEI policies in the workplace, which the administration gave a blackface, along with the administration's attack against race-conscious affirmative action in higher education admissions. I can't help but just conclude that the administration is intent on making sure that its hostility toward black people in this country is as wide as possible. I've been to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and I can tell you that his claims about the museum not recognizing the progress that America has made is categorically false. I will tell you briefly about the museum. I'm looking at the map right now. There are 5 floors with exhibits. The lowest floor is called Slavery and Freedom, and it covers the period 1400 to 1877. Those of us who have read a little bit about the arrival of black people in this country, they were brought here against their will, know that the first black people arrived in around 1526, not 1619 as folks often say, but 1526. And like I said, this bottom floor ends in 1877, which is when historians believe that the Reconstruction era ended. So it's called Slavery and Freedom. The floor above that is called Defending Freedom, Defining Freedom, the Era of Segregation, starting in 1876 and ending in 1968. Covering the era in which Black people, along with other non-white groups at different points, were subjected to racial terrorism. But it's very clear that Black people bore the brunt of that. But even that floor points to the future because it does
United
show
States of America, we the people of the United States.
Under the law in 1968, thereabout, 1968, passage of the Fair Housing Act. The third floor is called The Changing America from 1968 and beyond. It talks about the movement. Let's see, so there's several sections there. I'm seeing a section on cities and suburbs, a section on marches for civil rights. It goes to the fourth floor. The fourth floor talks about, let's see, hold on. The fourth floor, we see it's called community galleries, and it talks about the participation of Black people in sports, in the military, and above that, we see the culture gallery, which has exhibits showing the participation of Black people in visual arts, in music, in theater, and in other forms of cultural expressions. So I'd say that that very top floor is devoted to Black cultural productions. This museum does not paint a picture of gloom and doom. It shows that slavery was where America started. It also makes clear that that is not where America ended up. So to me, his tweets on X or wherever it is that you read it, Gary, it's misinformation. There's no need to remove the references to slavery. In my view, I don't think the museum I just talked about does a good enough job anyway of discussing African American history. So if the references to slavery are removed, it'll do a far less job. It won't even do as good a job as it's doing now, and I think that it can tell more. But you've got to take what you get, what you can get. I don't think there's any defensible reason for removing the references to slavery. I just think that the right-wing arm of the United States government, which is represented by the Republican government officials we have, are anti-Black and authoritarian, and they want to make the best use of their time so that they can take us back to a period when Black people are even more marginalized than we are now. That's it.
I'm beginning to wonder, based on what you just said, thank you for what I will recall your testimony, that somebody is pulling the strings. Remember how he ran against the deep state? Well, who's the deep state that's the puppeteer behind what Donald Trump has to say? Because based on your description, just reading the map of what that museum, which I presume is going to be the targeted museum of this audit by attorneys, we can see that the president was incorrect in his description of what is offered at the museum, which leads me to reach the, if not conclusion, the strong suspicion that Donald J. Trump has never set foot in that museum, ever. And in fact, for those of you who think that the liberally biased media are unfair to the president, I would say that our responsibility in journalism is to hold power to truth, no matter what the political ideology of the government official. And the question that I would be asking at the next gamble of the president is, Mr. President, have you ever entered the Museum of African American History at the Smithsonian? Then how do you reach the conclusion that you do, that there's nothing uplifting, that it's all negative, and it makes this country look horrible, and we're the hottest country in the world, and that's woke, whatever the hell that means? That's the question that the press corps should be asking him. I want to know who the hell is telling him to say this. Because I am certain he has no freaking idea what you just offered to us, Hurricane. No idea whatsoever. And you know what? If my suspicions are correct, and this is going to almost sound conspiratorial, and you guys can check me on this if you disagree. Come up to the stage and tell me I've fallen into a rabbit hole here. Then this goes much deeper than just Donald Trump. And if it goes much deeper than just Donald Trump, then this whole thing, this whole idea, well, this is just Donald Trump, well, this is just the way he talks, he doesn't really mean what he's saying, etc., etc., etc. No, he's representative of a machine, a political machine that is in full gear, and when he leaves office, that machine continues. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, let me just respond quickly. So, no, you're not wrong. You're right. There is a long-term plan. Roll back the civil rights gains that our country has made since 1954. The plan has several moving parts. One of those parts is a transformation of the federal judiciary, so that legal challenges to the civil rights laws that we have relied on for a long time are successful when they reach the Supreme Court. I would say that the federal judiciary piece is well nigh complete. Right now, the Supreme Court has a solid conservative majority, 6-3. And in the next few years, I expect Thomas and Alito to step down so that Trump can appoint their successors. Sotomayor is old, and I don't know what's going to happen during the next few years, but it's quite possible that Trump may have the opportunity to appoint her successor as well. So if he does that, we will have a Supreme Court with 7 conservative justices and only 2 liberal justices. So, as far as I'm concerned, the Supreme Court is going to remain under right-wing control for at least 20 more years. That's just what it is. I don't know what else to tell you.
To that point, Hurricane, I just want to point out that today I happened to be watching just before I had to set the room up a live stream on Substack with Carrie Moran, the former ABC correspondent, who is now getting a lot of attention. Him and Jim Acosta, the former CNN correspondent, with their clearly biased. And that's fine. But they're putting people on, interviewing people to promote their point of view, and which they couldn't do, so they feel unencumbered by the constraints they had when they were working for news organizations. And he had as his guest, and by the way, this is the beauty of what we do here and what Moran is doing. He didn't have a time constraint. I have time constraints, but he didn't have a time constraint in this interview. And unlike the interviews you see, maybe even those that he conducted when he was on television, where there's somebody whispering in his ear, wrap it up, ask him this, cut him off, this kind of thing. He lets his, as I just did with you, he lets his guests speak without interruption. And he has a conservative judge as his guest today. And this is what I find very interesting. This conservative judge, I guess he's retired. And I'm sorry I can't recall the gentleman's name.
Luttig, is it Luttig, L-U-T-T-I-G?
I don't, it could be. It could be. That sounds familiar, but I can't say for sure. You can look it up on Substack. He expressed exactly what he's coming from a different perspective than you. He expressed exactly what you just expressed. He says that there's only one responsibility for the Supreme Court, that they're supposed to put their political ideology aside and rule on the constitutionality of the cases that come before them. And he finds it as a conservative, and I guess he's a strict constitutionalist conservative, appalling that this Supreme Court is not. We should not be having the discussion that we're having, whether the president is going to appoint a conservative or a moderate or a liberal to the bench in order to push through an agenda. It's not a political entity. It's not supposed to be a political entity, the Supreme Court. He is just appalled. And coming from him, and then hearing you echoing what he just said is very interesting.
Oh, just two more things quick, because I know other people want to speak. The other thing that Donald Trump has done so far is expanded the power of the executive branch by sending to the Supreme Court cases that would allow the Supreme Court to give the executive branch more authority. He did that with the case concerning universal injunctions. He also did that with the case concerning immunity from criminal prosecution. The third piece is making it more difficult for the American public to access the truth about America's past and present. In order to do that, one has to control what the Smithsonian museums show. The purpose of the Smithsonian museums, if you go to the Smithsonian website, is to increase and diffuse knowledge. How is the Smithsonian able to do that? It's able to do that by maintaining all of these museums that contain these amazing exhibits that not only delight the senses of people who visit, but also inform them about important aspects of American history. By changing the narrative, by whitewashing America's history, the Trump administration will be able, if it is successful, to miseducate the American public. So that's the other piece, controlling public education to the extent possible. Doing so by changing the Department of Education's focus, and also by changing what the Smithsonian Museum is able to show the public. So this is just another. This is part of the long-term plan. And unfortunately, Gary, I'm going to close by saying we're responsible for this. Donald Trump is here because a long time ago, Americans laid a foundation strong enough to support his ascent. And so we're going to have to fight really, really hard if we want this country to move in a different direction. And fighting hard is going to require us to look inward and be honest about what we see.
I'm done. Thank you, Ricky. We went we expanded the discussion. We didn't go astray with Hurricane, and also with Your Honor, because really what we're talking about is an expansion of the executive branch. I've never heard of a president trying to direct. And by the way, it's not just the Smithsonian. If you recall the words that he used in his True Social post, it was museums all across America, but specifically the Smithsonian he's looking at. But you gotta believe that if he's successful there, they're gonna move on to any other museum that accepts any kind of largesse from the federal government.
Gary,
You know, sort of like what they did with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with regard to NPR and PBS.
Gary, you forgot those posts on Truth Social are called truths.
I know, isn't that weird? Thank you, Hurricane. Does this mean you're ready to go, Scott?
I'm ready to go.
Go ahead, my brother.
Nice. Yeah, I gotta get on Truth Social. That's hilarious. Well, of course, I mean, the answer to this is no. Of course, these things should not be removed. It's very interesting when Trump toured the museum, and I don't know if somebody already mentioned this, but when he toured it in 2017, he had a very, very different take.
He did tour it. Okay, well, Gary stands corrected.
Yeah,
Did he go to the African American Museum?
This was when he visited the National Museum of African American History and Culture in 2017. He had a different opinion about discussion of slavery in the museum. This is from ABC News. In his remarks that day, he praised Bunch, the current Secretary of the Smithsonian, who was then the founding director of the National Museum of American History and Culture, African American History and Culture. Trump referred to the museum as incredible, done with love, and a truly great museum. By the way, that's also what he says about the Declaration of Independence. It's a document of love and unity. He praised abolitionist figures, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, and Frederick Douglass. He even recounted a story he'd learned about a runaway slave. He learned. This is amazing. He called the tour of the museum a meaningful reminder of why we have to fight bigotry, intolerance, and hatred in all of its very ugly forms. So, yeah, I mean, that was at one point apparently he had a different take.
Let me just say, Scott, that I will correct myself and apologize for speculating, which I should probably never do. I'm the fact checker here. Now you fact check me, and I appreciate it. But I will say this.
So, Gary, you can post your retraction as a truth on Truth Social.
Yeah, right. But here's the thing. Then my question to the president would be, at my next gavel opportunity, as a member of the Washington Press Corps, which would cause me to lose my White House credentials, I'm sure, I would pull that very article, I would quote that very article, and then I would say, Mr. President, what has changed?
Yeah, that would be interesting. And then he would say, "You're very nasty. Gary's very nasty. He's fake news. He's fake news up in Fox in New York. They don't even love me anymore. Fake news. We can only trust Newsmax." Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, it's a bad idea. Of course, we want look, we don't want a sort of sanitized history, right? I mean, we want, and slavery is America's original sin, right? This is part of the fabric of our founding, and it's not to say that we haven't made progress. It's not to say that things have not changed. It's not to say that we aren't, that we haven't made huge strides to be a successful, thriving, multiracial democracy, but we have miles and miles to go. And I don't think sanitizing the history and sort of, I almost said whitewashing, which is literally what we'd be doing there, is helpful. And as someone, this is interesting. As someone who stands in a religious tradition, as part of, the people of the book, the Bible, it's got terrible texts in it, right? I mean,
I was just thinking about that. Can you imagine if the president was Pope and he would order the cardinals to go through the Bible and remove any negative references to anything that is referred to in the Bible because it's very positive, and you can't show any of the negatives. That would be a good analogy, I think.
I don't like Leviticus talking about women's periods and you can't wear new kinds of fabrics. They get rid of everything. The Bible. Great again.
This is Zayn. You call me Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, no, I mean, we don't just like
Carolina.
excise books of the Bible. We don't excise, it's part of a tradition, and we relate to the tradition. Of course, we relate to those texts that carry in certain ways as our consciousness, morally, spiritually, and psychologically evolves. But I mean, what does it serve? And it is interesting about this. It used to be my conservative friends that used to make this argument. It was my conservative friends who said that we can't, in the interest of political correctness, sanitize the historical record, get rid of every offensive term, and get rid of everything. And now these things, it's interesting how things change, right? You just wait around long enough, and it's now the conservatives who are embracing the most extreme forms of postmodern relativism at times. We have our own alternative facts and all this stuff. And now it's the conservatives who are embracing the sort of sanitation of history, which they Scott, the left-wing things.
Scott, Matthew Bootspacco extension.
Right, exactly. And the irony, this is unreal. So, thank you, Gary. You continue to make this forum great again. You're a great American.
Thank you, Mr. President. Daryl.
Hey, Gary. You beat me to a couple of things. When you first asked how often like our president, how often does he go into museums in general, right? And we often know that like history is written and rewritten by the winners. That's we have that phrase because it's the truth. When you ask who is really pulling the strings, I agree with you because I don't think, regardless of what you might or I might think of him,
I don't think
this is
but
something
regardless
that's
of what
actually
you think
on
about
his
what I
radar.
think about what people
Let
think.
me say it that way, right? I do believe that there are people behind him, like Steve Bannon, Miller, that are really trying to plan for the post-Trump presidency for America. And I think a lot of this is planning for after Trump. What are our policies going to be? Who are we going to try to get elected? All of these things are for after Trump. And I agree with Your Honor. Like, this is just an example, right? I agree with Your Honor because at some point, if everyone, just says, what can we do about it, then nothing's ever going to get done. To the previous speaker's comments about look at what's happening with the Supreme Court. Like he's taking all of these things to the Supreme Court to set precedents for future arguments. If it were not trying to derail the topic, but if it were me, the Dems need to stop trying to play by the rules when there are no rules anymore. And we're seeing this because we're literally seeing the military policing on the streets of the capital. The capital of the country has the military policing citizens, of course in conjunction with federal agencies. I think if the Dems can get someone in that seat, they need to think about restructuring the Supreme Court, even if it means adding numbers, and be willing to do something that says we are willing to fight back. I'm not from California. I am following Gavin Newsom because it seems like he's willing to punch back, not just argue back, not have these Aristotelian conversations about what we're going to do, but if someone punches you in the face, I'm from New York City, someone punches you in the face, you punch them in the face back. And that's the only way we're going to change this. Because trying to rewrite history is easy if everyone just sits back and says, okay, you know, we have an entire generation of voters now who have no working memory of 9/11. They hear about 9/11, but that's their parents' story. They hear about 9/11, but they weren't there, and yet it's now this past history event that does not impact them emotionally or even politically. Something needs to be done about this, and I agree with you. I don't think I would have said, before Scott said what he said, I would have thought he had no idea as to what this museum is. The Smithsonian was, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe it was actually established by Congress, right? The only thing you can really do is have some of the more private museums like the Met and some of these other museums around the country really have to start pushing back, even if it means not taking federal funding if they're going to be controlled by the federal government. That's all I have to say.
I think that Scott's correction of my assumption is more damning of all of this than my initial assumption.
Absolutely.
So, you know, if I was almost giving him an out. But if in fact he's on the record as being embracive of the African American Museum specifically, and then today he wants removal from the Smithsonian, the very references that are part of the charge of the African American Museum, then for sure somebody is telling him what to do.
And that's the scary part, right?
And so it scares the bejeebers. It should scare the bejeebers out of all of us. And I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve on that here in the Critical Thinking Forum than general society. But I think we are. I think we are correct in, now when I say we, I'm speaking for me and Scott and you and, you know, many of the people, but maybe not everybody. And I'm happy to hear, you know, a different point of view. But I think just the fact that we're just discussing this, exploring it, we're ahead of the curve because we don't see this explored elsewhere. And if we do, I need to know about it because I'm not seeing it. And as you know, I do a lot of reading, both off the job and on the job. And I'm not really seeing this particular angle of what's going on discussed. Maybe others are doing it, but I haven't seen it. Thank you, Daryl. Meryl.
Well, I think you know, I've been on to Trump for a long time. I have not liked Trump for a long time. First Trump term was the goal was to have a lawless presidency. That's where Bill Barr came in, a lawless presidency. Well, he's achieved that. He achieved that. Now it is to be the most powerful, to be a dictator, to be and it is designed to dumb us down. You take away our ability to learn history, we become dumber. If you take away our ability to have empathy, then it's so much easier for him to come and tell us to do anything, something that's racist, something that's anti-Semitic, something that is anti-anything. Forget the woke stuff. It is all anti-anything that he doesn't like. If he doesn't like it, then we are going to not like it. Our children aren't going to like it. Our children aren't going to learn about it. And when you mentioned the Holocaust in Germany took the concentration camps, some of the concentration camps, and they made them into museums so that you could go and you could see the most atrocious things that were done. the most inhuman things that were done because they don't want you to forget something that was the biggest, most horrible thing that their nation did, that happened in their country. And that's not going to happen here. We have had book bannings since Trump became president, with banned books. And you can't read books by black authors that we used to read books about, that you and I read books in high school. Some of it was required reading. You can't read those books today. But the biggest thing I feel about is that it is so much easier if you dumb everybody down, if you take everything away from them that they can learn, and learn something that's oppositional to what you want them to learn. This is so much easier. And Trump, and by the way, I'll probably, Anson's not here anymore, so maybe I can say this and he's not going to get mad at me. Trump is a racist, and I don't think we should pretend that he's not. I don't think we should pretend about what he and his father was in the Ku Klux Klan. I don't think we should pretend that what he and his father did regarding rentals and the federal government coming after them twice. I don't think we should forget that. I don't think we should forget. I don't think we should forget who he tried to appeal to. The voters that he tried to appeal to when he came to them and he talked and said, bring it out in the open. Bring all your prejudices out in the open. He did that, and he opened up something where people used to sit around in the bar at night or sit around at their table at night. They came out now, and I think that I have to keep going back to what Aaron said and what Scott is saying, you're saying, and I do think it is all about taking away the ability to learn something that's happened in our history, something that was horrible and that we should feel shame about. We should feel bad. And it teaches our children empathy. Just like you can read Anne Frank to your children, read the children's version of it, and they will feel bad. They will feel an empathy about Jewish people and about what can be done. And that's what we need to do. We should never. You talked about the 4 little girls that were killed in that church. Do you know nobody went and tried to prosecute the people that did that? Not until, I think, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. There was a white Democrat a lawyer who said, we need to do this, and went after them, decided to prosecute them. This is all I can say is this is a presidency that is designed to become a dictatorship. It is designed to make us, we're not going to get good press anymore. We'll get leaks. We're not going to be able to have really good investigative reporting because he's trying to smother that. We can't have television stations that are going to report things that might be more earnest, that he doesn't want us to learn. But I think absolutely, going to the Smithsonian, you're whitewashing history. You're taking away something that we should learn. And if we're dumb, he can tell us anything he wants. And you mentioned the Civil War, by the way. Well, we're having ships named after treasonists, ships that were named after black heroes. We're having, again, we are rewriting history. Thank you.
Thank you, Meryl. Yeah, I know the movement it's interesting, the movement to remove the Confederate statues was really opposed by the MAGA folks because it's part of American history. And whether you agree or disagree with what those Confederate figures did, it's part of our history, and we cannot ignore our history and don't remove them. They were significant figures in U.S. history, and so you should not be taking them down. And these are the same people who are saying remove references to slavery while putting those, reassembling and re-erecting those very statues that had been removed correctly or incorrectly in the first place. So there's a definite hypocrisy there, Beryl.
Preserve them, give them a museum, put them in a museum, and people can go and see them just like you can go, should have been able to go to the Smithsonian and learn history. I have no problem with them being preserved. I have a problem with them being history being rewritten about them. I have a problem with you taking military bases or places that were named after people that weren't treasonous and now renaming them again, going back. Those are the things. Revere them in a museum where people can go and they can revere them, they can see them, they can learn about them. Thank you.
Or learn not to revere them. But, right. Thank you, Meryl. But it's just so interesting, the hypocrisy there. David, and by the way, we are now at the 6:02 Eastern Time. We will no longer be inviting folks onto the stage, but we are officially into extra time, so everyone on the stage, time permitting, will get the opportunity to speak. David.
Yeah, they wanted to give a slight correction as to what you said. They didn't say history; they said heritage. Right? That's what they were doing as part of their heritage, which was the awkward thing they made. You know, the people say that that the Confederate statue represents their heritage. All these employees are running around putting flags in your car and do all that kind of stuff. That's you can do that, but nobody's getting rid of these statues or just putting them in the museum or putting them in the context of history. You know, that was something I thought was the perfect thing to do. That's where it needs to be. Maybe there's a few people that wanted to erase them all together, but most people, I think, understood that they should be in a museum. So in that regard, that's where they should be at, right? So we can look at that from history. But on to, sort of a bigger topic here. I think it's easy. Everybody's going to say no, right? But I have to say this. Like, I was raised in a household where my parents always told me that, you could not depend on the school system. You could not depend on the government or any
Cool pothole collisions. I mean,
tell you all of your history. So they were
is
always
that how you found me? I mean, keywords
sure
with
that I
regards
was
to
learning
Bitcoin,
about
etc. Was it a Clubhouse video?
my
Probably was.
history as
Probably
an
was the
African
Bitcoin.
American, and then the history.
It's true. A lot of people want to peg
kingdoms and empires and
crypto to gold.
across Africa and all those areas.
I know Peter Schiff has a project like that.
Where most slaves came from.
I'm about to troll this room and do a southern accent and pretend my name is Anon.
This is a bad thing.
See how people respond to me with southern accent.
There's a lot of black families in America.
Hi, Gary. My name is Anon. You can call me Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, but David, that's great. Let's just say that the entire black community has been organically educated. It's not that community that needs to learn. There are other communities that need to know about these things, obviously.
Yes, there are other communities. Yeah, I get that aspect of the community. But just from the standpoint, like, I'm not shocked at the different attempts of people to try to remove things or try to switch the Smithsonian. I was even looking at the Museum of African Dysphoria in San Francisco to see how much money it was getting from the government, right, versus how much it was getting privately, and how much you need to fill that out, right, for other people who want to go.
So should I do? I'm gonna defend Trump with my southern accent, but what would be funny is also to pretend to be like a deranged, liberal, unhinged, deranged, like do a TDS skit.
In her early days of a K-12 educated,
I'm absolutely perturbed.
California to make sure that they corrected the way
this is an attack on our freedoms as the museum going public.
But she wanted to make sure that people knew that he didn't intend to do it in the South, right? That you needed to know the whole truth, of how that came about, right? And to do that. And they fought for things like, even in museums, they fought against having Egypt being placed in a different area than the rest of Africa, right? So they were constantly fighting in these areas to make sure that history and different aspects of history were being told in the way in which they truly were. So I think it just takes a broader number of people get out there to make sure and educate, and especially in a country at this point where our government is very focused on individual states' rights, right? We have an opportunity in California, which may be easier than and some people in other states aren't going to have that opportunity, but we do have an opportunity in some of these states to really push to make sure that we enshrine in our own states the ability for people to have access to different things that they need to do to learn about history. In the case of this president, we're going to ride this out. Right? There's really not much to do. We're not going to ride it out, right? But what we can do is we can use our collective selves to push, whether it's to push out the president, since it's Stephen Miller and some other people speaking into his ear, and he's all of a sudden changed the tune from where he was in the first term, all those different things, whether he really cared or not. That's about the best thing that we can do at this moment. Right? That's going to be our collective energy is going to be able to do that. And also, what I want to say to other people who need to learn, right? We're going to look. We still have the internet. We still have the ability to teach other people themselves. Because you might have to rely on that too, right? In the old days, I just want to use this bit of history. In the old days, the Chicago Defender, right, which was a African American newspaper from Chicago. They used to
I know the Chicago Defender.
Yeah, you know that. Yeah, they used to sneak that into the South, right, for people to be able to read back in the day because they weren't supposed to be reading, right? So they used to go down and sneak that in there for people to get access to it. We don't have to sneak anymore, right? So we have let's say, another way of fighting is that we have tons of ways, tons of avenues to be able to make sure that people are still going to be educated on the subject matter. But in terms of what's going on with Smithsonian, I just think it takes a collective group of people to be able to fight that particular issue. And at the same time, there's some aspects that we're just going to have to ride out a few more years, and then we'll be able to fully deal with it and address with as much as we can afterwards. So that's what I'm going to say. But this is not unexpected.
Thank you, David. And we will now go. And by the way, I don't know whether writing it out really works, given that I believe that there's a long-term plan, but maybe you'll get lucky. Glenn Alley.
Hey, thank you for letting me come up. I will say that one of the things where I think why Trump is doing what he's doing with the Smithsonian and being a little bit more on point with the racism this time around is because he really don't need black people anymore. He doesn't need to feign like he's not racist. He can let that just go. So like a lot of the stuff before, I used to tell people all the time, he's doing things that are more so a show to make it seem like he cares about black people. Like, pardoning Jack Johnson, giving a pardon to Kodak Black, just random little things that are, that are more of more symbolic than actual equality is what Trump was doing the first time. So now that he's in there a second time, he knows he can't get elected for a third term. He doesn't have to do that anymore. He can just let go and go for like that base that he already knew that he had. So like I think that's one thing that's going on. And I know somebody like mentioned earlier about, kind of like the ties behind it, who's pulling the strings and stuff. When you talk about things like the Confederate statues and whatnot, if you go and look at it, a lot of them aren't traced straight back to the Confederacy. A lot of them were built by, organizations like the Daughters of the Confederacy or like the Children of the Confederacy. A lot of them came about in around 1915 to, I think I want to say it's from around 1890 to 1920 is when a lot of them got put up. And that was when there's also a giant boom in the Ku Klux Klan, which was also tied in with that. So there's a lot of like built-in systemic racism that has to do with like the statues and whatnot. And yeah, like Trump is just like, he's just going back to his most base natural instincts right now because he doesn't have to appeal to us anymore. And like, there's no more races to win. That's what I think, honestly. That's my little piece.
Thank you, Glenn. David. And Stan, we're not going to get to you. You came up too late. Sorry, pal. Go ahead and write what you wanted to say in the chat above. David.
How's everybody doing?
All is well that ends well. So we'll see how the show ends.
Trump has a war room of people
I'm sure you have something very insightful, but we can't hear a word you're saying. I'll give you an opportunity to fix that and come back to you, David. Chris.
Hey, Gary. Today I'm. Oops, David. Hey, David.
I just muted him because he's not making the trip. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. You were lagging out, but he said he'll come right back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. Oh, Gary, today I'm not happy because obviously the title, and it's not your fault about the title being bad. It's the fact that we shouldn't have to have that conversation. And I'll keep putting it in the chat, and I'll keep saying it on this stage. This is just another one of those good old diversions to get us back off the Epstein list. And he's doing really good because now he's starting to weigh on people's heartstrings. And that's just going to give him, what, maybe 3 more weeks of this, or maybe 2 more weeks of this before Congress gets back in office. So, I mean, he's just going to keep trying to hammer it on us until we no longer care about it. What's up, brother? Until we actually just move completely past the Epstein file. And these things do matter. I'm not saying they don't. He's actively trying to harm this country for whoever, as you guys have already broken down, whoever is pulling his strings. 1 year he says this, he gets back elected, he comes back, he's saying new things. The new things aren't old things from him. This is the same man that took out a whole page article on the Central 5 boys who he said deserved life in prison and all the bad things that happened to them over a lie. So it's not far-fetched that he would say these things or do these type of things. But it is very obvious that he wants us to get off the main topic, which is who and why are you in the Epstein files? Who else is in those Epstein files? Who's else in charge of more important things than Donald Trump that is in those Epstein files and would be exposed if they came out? Again, I don't want to move this conversation away from this topic, but I want to continue to regurgitate and re-spit out every single chance I can when we have these topics. That he's just trying to further move the ball down the field. Yes, this is negative. This is extremely bad. I go to the African American Museum at least once a year, and it's a great place to be. It's a great place to learn. It's a great place to understand the dynamics of what slavery not only did to a culture of peoples, or an ethnic group of peoples, and that would be black people, and actually what it did culturally to white people. The urge and the ability to give them, and I speak of them as Caucasian people, the urge and the ability to give them the sense of well-being and power that was held over black people's head for 400 years. It is something that all white people need to see. Even if they have a racist bone in their body and they still don't walk out of there with a changed mind, it should be something we all find ourselves needing to learn about. And it's just bigger than slavery. It's about learning black culture as a whole. I think if we spoke more as a people and less, dialogue and analysis, and actually have real conversations, we'll realize we're way closer than we expect. We have the same issues. We have the same crazy uncles. We have the same crazy mother, or the nice sweet mother, or we have the dad that was there or was not there. These things aren't one side or the other. That is just who we are as a people. And what he wants to further do is push us away from realizing that we are really closer than what people think. He wants it to be an authoritarian, so he also needs it to look like we're better than you and you. This isn't just about black people. This happened to Hispanic people. He did the same with Hispanics. They're all criminals. They're all rapists. It's all about making the purity of the white skin again. And I hate that it's that way, because when it comes down to it, and this might be I won't just say controversial, because it's really just facts. White people voted this in. Maybe they didn't see it coming down this hard or down this line or this pathway, but some of us did, and it did not take a race to see it. It was because some of the things he priorly did actually shown, hey, he could take it too far, and it won't be good for the country. Not just the race, but the country. Hey, Marshall, could you go on mute, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
I was going to land here. I was on stage, and I was going to land here. My biggest thing isn't, hey, he's taking out more history out of museums, which he is, and I agree with Scott, or it was your honor, I believe, and we as the people will have to find our backbone and fight for it. I do agree there, but what I also want people to realize is we're going to keep getting further and further away from the Epstein files, the closer and closer we get to Congress getting back in office. And to me, that should be what we pay attention to, because he's just going to try to get us off of it while doing the craziest shit possible. So we no longer think of it as important. And that's scary because now we're protecting pedophiles instead of following up on it, because the man in charge.
Don't know it's an
Excuse me.
No, I'm a moderator.
I never said that. I never said he was a pedophile. I never said he was a pedophile. I said he's protecting pedophiles. Hold on, wait, guys.
All right, so wait a minute, hold on, everybody stop for a second, please.
Go for it, Gary.
Okay, Odienware, you're not a moderator. So, it's not for you to judge how the room is run. Let Chris respond to Marshall, and then we'll let Marshall,
I'm not gonna go back and forth. I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say and get off this stage.
okay.
I was stating that he is protecting pedophiles. I've never said Donald Trump was. We know that we don't have anybody else in jail other than the dead Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Those weren't the people that were paying for him, making sure he had all the money. Hey, could you shut up? Man, could you just stop? Could you just stop? Could you just stop? Because he could have released the files he currently has, and we could have figured out who the pedophile was.
So he could have released the files.
Hey, Marshall, you know what? Hey, Gary, thank you. Gary, thank you for letting me speak, Gary. Thank you for letting me speak, Gary. I hate to be interrupted by Marshall when I'm making a good point, because he does that when you make good points in this space. And I don't want to go back and forth with him and take. Marshall, can I please say my goodbyes to Gary? This is weird. This is weird. This is weird. This is weird.
You simply don't know that he is or he
This is
isn't.
weird. Now you're fighting against it. Now you're fighting against it. Now you're fighting against it. Gary, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Accusation.
Until we get the files, Marshall, the pedo conversation's gonna get live. Until we get the files, with all detailed files in it, we're gonna keep live in the pedo on Donald Trump for protection, because he has the ability to release it, and he removed it.
It's not convincing.
And that's what I just said. So fine. So be quiet and let me finish. Because you're weird. Be quiet and let me finish. Gary, thank you. Gary, thank you for the time, as always. And I would like to move on by saying we just need to keep our eye on the ball, because when we don't keep our eye on the ball, people like Marshall will keep trying to push us away from it. So we don't find out what's going on, because we're going to find out eventually that the people that are
I can't understand, and probably nobody else can, or either of you are saying.
I have the floor. You should be quiet while I have the floor.
Okay.
I'm getting off the stage.
Okay, Chris, thank you.
Okay, like I said,
I can't understand, and I'm
he
sure
does that
if I
every time
can't.
I get to talk, Gary.
Okay.
More than less than I get up to talk. He steps on my conversation as if I said something directly to him. And that's weird. Take your turn when you get it, Marshall. You will be next. You're the next moderator on stage. You've been gone the whole time. Now, the moment you get on stage, you want to speak. Be quiet.
Because
I think that if Chris and Marshall have to work this out.
I don't want to work this out with Marshall. I don't know him. This is weird. I don't like it.
All right, if you
It's like being
guys
touched by somebody you
want to
don't
have
like.
this discussion,
I
have
don't.
it off the stage. Well,
I
you're
don't.
having it. You're
I
having
don't.
it.
I'm telling you.
But you're having it.
I'm asking you, Gary, to please tell him to stop talking.
I am trying to regain control of the
Yes, sir.
room.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You're not cooperating either.
I just want to get my submission now. Go ahead.
Okay, you got your stuff in, man.
I was
Got it
actually
in.
almost done. I was not finished until I was interrupted by Marshall that wanted to really do what I was speaking about.
Well,
Beautiful.
see, there's a
You
problem.
got it, Gary. You got it, Gary.
You got this, Gary. Marshall's a fucking punk little bitch.
I just understand now when I get to getting too close to what he does not like, he gets to interrupt me and throw me completely off. And since you allow him on your
Hi,
stage,
Gary. This is
he
A
gets to
now.
room and I don't get to
It
I'm
doesn't
new
have
to
anything
Clubhouse.
to do with that.
I'm
Pedophile
new to
is
Charles.
a legal criminal accusation. If you are going to accuse somebody of a legal crime,
I never said he was a pedophile. I never said he was a pedophile.
that he
I never
harbors
said.
pedophile.
No, I said he did not give the documentation, which. I said he did not give the documentation which
Okay,
exposed
okay,
the
let
pedophile.
me
but you don't wanna hear that.
clear up,
That's not
let me clear up the confusion, because I think
Sure,
there's a
Marshall.
discussion here based on something that wasn't said. And then we're gonna move on, because we're not talking about Epstein today.
I wasn't trying to.
I don't know whether you were or you weren't, and I'm not making any accusations, but I want to clear up what it just occurred so we can get back on track. So Chris, and he stated this in text before he came up to speak in the chat, that he believes that the president is raising all these various issues, including in the context of today's discussion, the Smithsonian institution, and to wipe out any references to slavery. Not that he isn't serious about it, but he believes, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, that the timing of this is designed, as the timing of many things that are going on right now, to divert the public's attention away from the Epstein files. Is that a correct summation of your point, Chris?
No, Gary, you're about right. Like I said, I want people to realize that all this stuff does matter. We don't want to see the slavery exhibits out of any museum disappear, but I also want people to realize that we've been going down a big hill of bullshit, and it's only because they gave Congress 5 weeks to get out the Epstein votes. And we need to continue to remember this, because in 3 weeks we'll be back in Congress, and we need to have that information out and find out what really is going on in our country. Some of the people in that actual Epstein list could be people in charge of what happens in our country, and we need to get them out of here, because they're dictating things that we don't know if it's good for the betterment of themselves or it's just to push it all under the rug. But we do need to figure that out as soon as possible. And I'll land. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I don't want to get into a discussion about Epstein, but I will say that Congress will be receiving, supposedly, and this is Gary's word, supposedly, the Epstein files on Friday. And Congress has said, whoever in Congress is responsible for this, that they will be released redacted in order to protect the victims. I'm concerned that maybe they're not getting all the files, or that what's released will be redacted to conceal the names of the perpetrators that you so strongly want to see, as do I, Chris.
Which is also my fear, but we're gonna have to get something to start this progress.
Right. But again, maybe Friday or maybe later, for sure, we'll be back onto the Epstein story. He can't shake me off that story. Don't worry. Marshall, did you want to speak to the issue at hand, the whitewashing of slavery? Yeah.
Oh, I don't agree with that stuff at all. I am a very big fan of tell the history, the whole history, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. You lay it out for everybody to see. You make it to make their own minds up. You don't cover anything. You don't sugarcoat anything. You don't try to twist people's minds. You just tell the damn story. And if you tell the damn story, you have both the good and the bad and the ugly about our country, and you have the future peace of our country, which I think is very important. I am very committed to the complete telling of the American story, and that includes things like Jim Crow and the post-Reconstruction effort in the South and how that shaped the modern United States. We don't get to, and we shouldn't sugarcoat those things. I will say there is a way to erase the history of your country so that you tell the whole truth and you can be proud of where you've gotten while still understanding there is much, 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 much farther to go, right? And that we should be proud of where we have gotten to, but we shouldn't sit on our laurels and say that's the way we should operate. But overall, tell the truth. Not my truth, not your truth, not Chris's truth, the truth. And that means you say the good, the bad, and the ugly. You make sure people know that part of the reason the Second Amendment was argued about in the South was because of the slave revolt in Haiti.
And then at the convention, these folks argued, so the planters argued for it as a way to execute possible slaves. Right? You tell the whole story, not just part of the story. And I think if you tell the whole story, the United States is something quite beautiful.
Oh, that's lovely.
We're not where we need to be. We're not where we should be. But we seem to keep chugging along at that goal. And I think that is incredibly important. And I don't think you can get to that with some sort of mythologized idea of where you come from. You have to know the bad things you did along the way that really, really messed stuff up. And so I'm a huge believer that when, for example, there's a National Lynching Museum in Alabama, and the idea of walking through the museum is that you're supposed to be bawling when you come out of it, like a child, like a baby that got their head hit. You're supposed to cry. And it's because that history is so devastating, so sad, so evil that it was inflicted. But it like brings you to this place where you understand that little piece. So, boiling it down to something. Tell the whole story. Don't be afraid of it. Don't cover it up. Like we are speculate on that. I think we do know that we did. Good and bad, and those should be acknowledged.
I remain steadfast in my commitment to the
and when they're not, we do a disservice to our country. We do a disservice to our fellow man. We do a disservice to folks who don't look like me. Right? Like I mean, Gary, you've been to McAllen before. It's 90% Hispanic. If we don't accurately tell the history, those folks get left on the wayside. And that's not fair. It's not an accurate telling of what happened in history. You don't have to make America out to be this like separable bad thing, which is the worst thing since Emperor Palpatine and Star Wars. But reflecting on what we've done is critical. If we don't, we're never going to be able to improve anything or learn anything. And I personally study white history am very disturbed that most Americans only have about 100 years of history in their head. It really does not benefit the long-term health of the country. And it gives people jaded points of view, which end up helping tactics of discrimination and racism in our country. And that's something we should all fight against deeply. So that might have been impassioned and long, but I hope it made sense.
No, that might be.
Thank you, Marco. I know that there are a lot of people trying to get on stage, and I appreciate the response, but I cannot add anybody more to the stage. We're into extra time now, but please feel free to click on the link above and join the chat and make your feelings known there. David, have you fixed your audio issues?
I think so.
Yes, sounds like it.
No, this has been a great room. I wish I had some positive to say, but what I was saying before I was cut off was that it appears Donald Trump has a team of somebody, whoever, that comes out with a new agenda every day. And I don't know, maybe because of the Epstein situation, he's bringing the full force of the shock and awe that the championing since he got elected. But this is really bad for the country, symbolically and emblematically. Imagine during Europe deciding to shut down Holocaust museums. What would that do to the history of that horrific event? Let alone here in America. I remember when I came away from the British War Museum and the British government decided to marry the Holocaust with the instruments of war. And, I wasn't the same after that. And granted, I wasn't ground zero like Auschwitz or a major concentration center like that, where I was viewing what happened there, but it was pretty impactful. And I would say for little children, that would be quite starring, and how to explain that to little children, that humanity that this could happen to humanity. Well, I think America has waded into the history of a similar atrocity in different form. You know, the manacling and the trafficking of over 15 million plus West Africans. Imagine the Chinese coming over here and raiding the coastline of California and taking us back to China to work. What kind of impact that would have on our culture? And so I don't think we've done enough. This clipping of the Smithsonian. I mean, how many people have an opportunity to go to Washington D.C., let alone go to the Smithsonian and see the various things that Hurricane outlaid in our museum there? Since then, most Americans are getting their black culture through hip hop, through popular culture, through the news, through the marches, through the reactions to police violence in this country. And that's obviously being framed in ways that appear to be radical and deep state and every other way. And so without an historical analysis, there's going to continue to be an amnesia of how horrific the crimes of slavery were and how complicit white America was in that venture. And I can go down century after century and how the legacy of that institution has come to haunt us and continues to haunt us. And this is along the lines of the disrespect that the Latino communities experience with regards to ICE and immigration policies. You know, this is you know, and this is nothing more than going after and putting in play the 2025 Project 2025. And people are absolutely right. These are people coming to Trump with this agenda and asking Trump to go to the bully pulpit and implement these bad ideas on behalf of obviously a certain sector of this country, which is particularly white America. And I understand it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant to talk about, you know, maiming and owning another human being and how economically viable and beneficial that was to this country, any more than it is to talk about the railroading and the wiping out of the liquidation of the indigenous population who occupied this land. But it has to be talked about. I remember I hosted an Australian buddy to come out and visit me from England, and he just couldn't comprehend an English-speaking country with all the signage in Spanish. And I had to give him a little history lesson about this country was created. And it was a very telling moment because we're driving down the streets of, say, Lincoln and Washington, and yet we're running into streets called Pico and Sepulveda, which were former governors and landholders in this beautiful city of Los Angeles. But if you don't understand where the names come from and the history and why people are who they are, you're disrespecting them and you're diminishing their contribution to this country. And we all own in the success of America. You know, one of the great historians of this country, many have not heard of, wrote a book called The Counter-Revolution of 1776, and he talks about how the slaveocracy, the Revolutionary War was fought to maintain the economic institution of slavery. And we see that very telling in the fact that 20,000 plus slaves fought on the side of the crown. And there's a great book out called Comrades of the Crown that talks about that the slaves did not feel that their future was secure in this new government. So we pick that apart. How do we understand those early beginnings, let alone the Civil War that was fought? I did some research before I got on the stage, and I wanted to understand how valuable a slave was to the slaveholders. And according to the chat, the AI came back and said a male slave was worth about $1,800 US in 1860. And when I extrapolated that out to today's dollars, it's about 70,000 US. So you multiply that out by the number of those that were held as chattel, and that's millions and millions of dollars that basically walked off the plantation and became free overnight without compensation to the slaveholder. Well, when the UK got rid of their slavery, they made every slaveholder, from what I can understand, whole based upon the cost of that. Well, when you don't do that, Gary, when you create a war and then you say everybody's free after that, and you don't compensate the victims of the crime or of the institution, you're going to show the underpinnings of the KKK, the rejection of the Reconstruction era, the creation of Jim Crow laws, and everything else that's come after the fact. Everything else that's haunted this country since day one of the emancipation.
I'm sure you didn't. I was going to say, I'm sure you didn't mean it this way, but it kind of sounded like what you said is where we're like, we irreparably harmed ourselves. Am I misunderstanding you? I just want to make sure I'm tracking.
Well, explain how you heard what I said.
Were you saying the slave owner needs to be
Marshall causes all kinds of fucking hate.
I'm saying
everywhere Marshall goes, he causes fights.
Just as in the Haitian Revolution, Haiti was forced to pay back reparations for their independence.
So what I was going to ask,
the British, I'm saying, it created hostilities that are still haunting us to this day.
In my opinion, what I was trying to ask is, are we saying that the American project was solely founded on taking advantage of somebody that didn't look like us, or are we saying that's a facet of that? I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Well, it was an industry. It was an industry backed by banking, backed by insurance, backed by shipping, backed by land holding, and so it was tied to the whole economy of the South and almost to the North until it was eradicated. And so when you upended them economically, that's a lot of pissed off folks. And you're not sending the DEI training to make them understand, hey, you enslaved an actual human being here. This is an actual person that you own that we fought and died for. It's very hard to educate that person, that slaveholder, and that system of what just happened, right? And so everything that we've done henceforth has been a fight to get freedoms and rights that should have been accorded day one, but they weren't accorded day one. And to reference Hurricane's comments, the architecture in place to dismantle the civil rights laws, the Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court that's going after a lot of other different rights. Hillary Clinton just came out on the record mentioning that gay marriage may also be eviscerated by this court, and that's not guaranteed.
Yes, but there is a federal law passed in 2022 by a Democratic Congress and a Democratic president that solidified in the federal law the ability for gay couples to get married, as well as trans couples.
Okay,
Fair
enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Back onto that, but she did say that she believes that they're gonna go after the rights law the same way they went after Roe v. Wade to make it a state. That's what
my point with the federal Congress is already taken care of. It's not being passed as a state issue. Because the federal Congress and signed by Joe Biden put the law in place to guarantee people the ability to get married.
This 5 minutes went by.
Otherwise, she believes that it will
No.
probably go through the courts.
Smithsonian has not announced plans to remove references to slavery from its exhibit. Recent searches show Trump's
And I'm going to
criticism.
wrap you up, Dave, because it's 6:39, and I've got a drop dead time of 7 o'clock.
I know, you got to catch a French train. All right.
Right, so let's go quickly now to Anand.
Thank you.
Hi Gary, this is the first time I've been on your stage. I just re-downloaded the app. I haven't been on since Trump became president. And I want to say I'm kind of disappointed. There's a lot of Trump derangement syndrome and American derangement syndrome from a lot of the speakers in the room today.
Edmund, can you
I asked Grok, is the Smithsonian Museum going to remove references to slavery? Is this fake news clickbait? Excuse me, do not interrupt me, young man. No, the Smithsonian has not announced plans to remove references to slavery.
Gary, just so you know, that's Congressman John Kitover.
I know who it was. That he's going to make a great congressman. That's not coming from the Smithsonian, John. It's coming from the president, and I think you know that. In spite of your attempts to sound funny. But did you get that recorded? So you can put it on your YouTube? I know that's what that was. It was performance for YouTube. Alan.
Gary, first of all, I do have Congressman, or the candidate Kitover, on recording saying he is for the impeachment of Donald Trump. Let's make this very clear. Kitover wants Donald Trump impeached. Anybody who is running against him should let that be known. Number two, my room at 7 this evening Eastern, we will talk about what can we live without that is being spent by the federal government right now. Number three, absolutely insane that the Smithsonian would be attacked by the president. And when the hell are the Republicans going to get their head out of their ass and impeach the son of a bitch, Donald Trump? Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I think that the problem for those
Fucking
who are
Marshall.
concerned about what's
Fucking
happening
Marshall,
is that it's
stinking
not really
Rankin.
Donald Trump.
What a fucking,
That there's
he's
a
a
whole
tornado
machine
wherever
behind
he
it,
goes.
but,
Fucking meth mouth,
maybe the next
ugly
person won't
motherfucking
be
stupid
as strong as
motherfucker.
he
I
is
would have gotten
Gary.
through with it if Marshall doesn't know my voice
No, how you doing?
recognition. It's
Thanks
so
for the
annoying.
time and opportunity.
It's very annoying.
Definitely
That was a
stand
good
in
impersonation, but they can
quite
detect
of
me.
the individuals.
Very difficult to
Couple of the
obfuscate your
individuals
voice
that I've
because of the
listened to.
pattern,
Marshall
fucking
alone
banging on
about
Marshall
history,
Rankin's head all the
good,
time.
bad,
Boom,
or
boom,
ugly.
boom, Marshall,
You
Marshall,
know,
Marshall,
let him
Marshall,
live
Marshall.
so that we can all learn
Fucking
from it.
Marshall.
I do believe that each and every time we look at the history, there's some parts of pride.
Ooh, we were gonna go into JB's room, but it ended.
In his voters that he wants to bring to him and try to pull to him are more important than my ass that I'm still in Gaza.
Shlomi, so
That's it.
I do hear from other hostages that they feel that Netanyahu didn't make a priority of bringing them home. Do you feel differently? Do you think Bibi Netanyahu cares about the hostages and has made it a
Okay,
priority?
I'm gonna restart the live. That's a cut.
I think yes, because if it wasn't a priority, it would
Go to
say,
johnforcongress.com, make your donation now. Click the blog, click the link to Antidote. Thank you all for joining us yet again.
And they say we're gonna come to Gaza. We lost 1,200 people in one day. Okay, we're gonna sacrifice